In this video, I will talk about something that's called channel integration and systems. So what do I mean here? Now, typically, there may be exceptions, but I think for the majority of companies, this is true, the majority of companies will distribute through more than one channel. Right? So there may be companies will just have the internet, will just have physical stores, but I would assume most companies have some kind of combination of these. Now this is what they call then a channel system, right? So it's a company selling through more than one channel. Now, and if that is the case, this comes with the question of how do you integrate and coordinate all these channels. Now I have an example here from the field of automotive supply. So let's assume what the supplier does is it sells tires for your cars. Now how do tires get from the company to the customers, so people like you and me? And now there are many different ways, right? Now they can go through the original equipment manufacturers, meaning the car manufacturers. They can build their own platform online. They can go through wholesalers. They have a sales force. Now the wholesaler will then sell to repair shops or to car owners directly, and so forth and so forth, right? So even for a product that's as simple as, say, a tire, which doesn't seem to be a very complex product, now there may be great many different channels of distribution. Now this is, from one side is good from the perspective of the company, the supplier, because at least in theory, having more channel increases the probability that a product is eventually bought. Now, but this also can be a major source of conflict, and we'll talk about these, right? Now, what are major sources of conflicts in multi-channel systems? And this is something that you should not underestimate. Now, and you may know that if you have working experience in marketing. Now, this is typically something that will come up very quickly, these kinds of conflicts. Now, one of them being critical mass. Now, the more channels you have, yes, I assume the more likely you are to sell, but this may also entail that individual channels, they don't reach critical mass and are not profitable. Now, another thing that can happen is the perception of conflicts, right? So that manufacturers make a false assessment about the likely conflicts that are triggered within multi-channel systems. Now, let's take a different example. Now, let's assume there is an electronic retailers like Mediamarkt in Germany. So basically what these companies do, they buy electronics like TVs, DVD players, computers, smartphones, whatever, and they sell them off to end customers like people like you and me, right? Now let's assume one of these retailers has two main channels of distribution, right? So one of them being the physical store, and one of them being the internet. And what happens? What is very likely to happen these days, if you are like me or like most other people? So what do we do? What do you do if you need a new television? Now, what you may do is you go downtown, go into the store, look at the product, and see what it looks like, if it works, and so forth. Now, and then you talk to the salesperson and say, okay, I'm going to think about it, right? So thank you for taking all the time to talk with me and to consult me, advise me. Now I'll think about it, and maybe I'll come back. Now you go back home, you decide, yes, I want the television, but rather than going back to the store, you go online to the retailer's site and then order the TV online. Now from your perspective, that's fantastic. Now typically in many companies, at least the companies that I know, now this will be a major form of conflict. This can result in a disaster. Because what will happen? Now, because a physical store will say, assuming that the channels are managed as profit centers, right? So each of them having their own profit and profit targets. Now, assuming that is the case, the physical store will say, hold on, that person that had just bought the TV, that's my sale, right? Because I did all the convincing, I did all the talking, I had to invest all that money in building up the store and presenting the product in a very attractive way and so forth. Now, I had all the costs, and hence, I should get all the profits as well. Now, the internet channel is going to say, no, this is simply not true. You did a rotten job, and the reason why the customer bought was because we had a very attractive website, right? So we basically salvaged the sale from you, and the money should be mine, right? So two channels fighting over who should get assigned the profits, and the problem is how do you solve that? So how do you assign different profits and costs to individual sales channels when it's not so easy to distinguish, the root or this decision process of the customer. Now, apart from the, assuming you can manage the conflicts, now, having a multi-channel system is also very complex, right? So what people like doing these days, it's very popular here in Europe and the States, is that people will go look for a product online, buy it online, but then pick it up in a physical store, right? So pretty popular these days. The chain of effects is different. So I go to the website of the electronic retailers, I look for a TV, I buy the TV, but rather than having it delivered to my home, I say, well, I want to have a final look before I make my final call. And can I pick it up in the store and have a look and then take it with me? So this is what people like doing apparently. Very, very popular these days. Now, so yes, this sounds fantastic from a customer perspective. It's kind of a seamless customer experience. Now, from most of the companies that I know of, now this is very complex, right? Because it means now that a sale that is generated in one channel, right, that the product really needs to be there in the store for the customer to pick up, because this is what you promise. Now, although that may seem very simple, implementing that can be very difficult. Now, let's go back to the issue of conflicts, right? So how do you solve conflicts, or how do you make sure that your sales system, entire channel system, is effective? Now, there's something that you can use, a framework or tool that's very popular, is something that's called hybrid grids, right? Now, what you do in a hybrid grid, it's a matrix. Now, where in one axis, you have all the tasks that need to be performed within the sales or distribution process, right? Now, this can be the communication for information. This can be about reaching price agreements or placing orders, assuming the risk or facilitating payment, and so forth. So all the functions that need to be performed if the merchandise is going to get from the company to the customer. Now, on the other axis, you will list all the marketing channels that you have, right? Now, this can be the internet, direct sales, retail store, distributors, dealers, and so forth. Right? So combine these, you get a matrix consisting of these two dimensions. Now, what you do there is now for each field, you look which of these, so for each task that needs to be performed, which of these channels is best suited for that. So this is about assigning responsibilities to each and every channel member, and to make sure that everybody works in a coordinated manner. And if you do that thoroughly, now this can solve, at least help avoid a lot of conflicts that may otherwise ensue. Now, distribution is also important because many times it can make or break your marketing. Many times what you observe is that companies fail in their marketing, or that the products fail, and sometimes it can be because the product is bad or the idea behind the product is bad, but many times also because they did just not manage to get the distribution right, to get their product into the market. Now, this means that distribution from a manufacturer's perspective is very important. Now, and this also means that many times you will have to rely, unless you're selling directly, you have to rely on intermediaries. Now, and sometimes some of these intermediaries are so important that they're called key accounts, right? So you may have come across that term beforehand. Now, what are key accounts? Now, key accounts are those customers, generally corporate customers, who are so important to a company due to their actual potentially purchasing potential, right? So let's take an automotive supplier like Magna or Heller in Germany here. Now, BMW is a very important customer, for example, to these firms, right? Now, so from the perspective of Magna, now they need to get along with BMW, because if they don't, I mean, this is going to be hard of them of finding a similar sized customer. Now, this is what they call a key account, right? So from the perspective of supplier, BMW would be considered a key account. And obviously, we talked about that in the module on B2B marketing. Now, in that case, of course, you're very interested from a supplier's perspective to engage in a very close relationship with the firm, because there's so much at stake. And so what are areas of cooperation? Now, this can be related to the products. Now, you developing a product jointly with a customer. Now, this can be related to prices and processes, but also very important on the exchange of information, right? So again, assuming that both the supplier and the manufacturer will be more effective or more successful if they have a good understanding about what customers want. Well, then the exchange of information and the development of good solutions based on that information, that is very, very important. Now, when you talk about key accounts, there's also something that they call vertical marketing. So meaning that you engage in so that your marketing strategy is coordinated between different levels. Now, what does vertical marketing mean? And I think, again, it's easiest to explain that through an example. Now, let's assume they're the manufacturer, right? Say from the food industry, Nutella again, the chocolate spread. Now, that sells, interested in selling to the end customer, but has to go through a retailer. Now, what different forms of marketing could you observe? Now, first off, there's end customer-oriented marketing by the manufacturer, right? So the company Ferrero that sells, that manufactures Nutella, advertising on TV to end customers like me in order to get me to be interested in the product. Now, something else that may happen is that the manufacturer may then engage in trade marketing to the retailer, because the retailers are so important, the big retailers are so important for Ferrero, well, they will engage in some kind of marketing, for instance, giving special conditions for retailers. Now, then on the other hand, well, the retailer will also engage in some kind of marketing towards me, is trying to get me into the store through, for example, bonus programs, which is another form of marketing. Now, what we mean by vertical marketing, though, is, let's say, the manufacturer and the retailer coordinate their marketing at different vertical levels to achieve a maximum impact, right? Now, let's assume Nutella or Ferrero would go to the retailer and said, well, Christmas is coming, and I want to have a special Christmas, so I want to launch a special Christmas edition, of Nutella, and I'm sure all these people will buy it, and I'm going to run a fantastic advertising campaign. Now, for that to work, though, there needs to be something happening in the store, right? Now, you need to make sure, as a retailer, that the merchandise will be available, and probably that it's placed at very prominent spaces within the store that people can actually see it, right? There's some form of cooperation where the manufacturer and the retailer will say, well, it's best to put all our assets together now in order to achieve a maximum impact, right? So in order to increase profitability for both of us. Although vertical marketing sounds like a very good idea, so a company and a retailer cooperating to achieve a maximal effect, that sounds like a very good idea. Now, in many cases, again, there's conflicts, right? And this will be because the manufacturer and the retailer or the intermediary will have different interests, right? So, for example, right now, the manufacturer typically has an interest that all of its products are included in the retail outlets, right? So, for instance, let's assume Procter & Gamble, right? Now, Procter & Gamble will go to a retailer and say, well, I have this wide array of products ranging from shampoo to razors to potato chips to food and to diapers and so forth, all these different kinds of Procter & Gamble products now, and I want you to list all of them, right? And the retailer will say, okay, well, that's very interesting. Thank you for offering all that. Now, but I think I want to make a selection, right? So I will take Head & Shoulders as shampoo, I will take Pampers, and I will also take Gillette. Now, but all the other products, because I know these 3 products sell, now all the other products you take away, again, I'm not interested, right? Now, for instance, or another source of conflict, right? Now, the manufacturer would say, well, I'm kind of interested that my own brand gets promoted in the store, whereas, the retailer obviously would say, well, yes, that's interesting again. Now, but because I want to ensure customer loyalty, that the customers are loyal to the store and not so much to the brand that gets sold by the store, now my own trademark, my own brand needs to be present, right? Or in terms of order quantity, Procter & Gamble will go to the retailer or drugstore and will say, well, every time you order, there needs to be a minimum batch because otherwise it's going to be too expensive. Or the retailer will say, well, yeah, I'm not so sure about that, right? So I really like your diapers, your Pampers, and your Gillette blades and so forth. Now, but these get sold very unevenly, and it's hard to predict. And because I don't want to have a large storage, a lot of that stuff sitting in the back room. Now, I'd rather order in a flexible manner, right? So I tell you, a couple of days in advance how many products I need, but this may change from day to day or from time to time, right? Now, because these two have inherent differences, in their interest. Now, there's typically a lot of conflict between retailers and manufacturers, although, at least in principle, they could agree on the same idea, which is, to achieve maximum impact and to engage in very effective marketing. But still, the interests of these two can differ, thus leading to conflict.